we got a special co-host and we got a special guest with our returning guest, Mr. Jake. You want to go ahead and introduce your dad?
Yes, this is Jeff, my dad, the other part of Just Geckos.
Yeah, the older part.
More knowledgeable part.
Hey, as long as he's passing that knowledge down to you, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
It's just remembering it all.
that's the thing. But yeah.
Right. All right. So, Mr. Holland, how did you go? What's your herp history, right? How did you get into this? We heard Jake's story. What's your story?
Well, as you can see, I'm slightly older than Jake. So I started probably when I was about 8 or 10. So we're going back to 1978, probably, or 1976. So I decided I wanted a pond. So I got what we call a butler sink, which is just like a ceramic sink, which is probably sort of, oh, you can't really see my hand. It's probably 18 inches by sort of 12 inches by about 18 inches deep. So I thought if I sink that in the garden, stick a plug in it, I can have a pond. So I got this pond going, and then I got newts in there. And then I found a frog that I used to feed a worm on a daily basis. And then I thought, I know what, I need a tank to keep them in. So then it was basically what you could catch in the wild. I suppose you shouldn't do it now, but there's no need to now, I guess. And then I'd sort of probably in the sort of late 80s, the fish shops would have the odd bit and bob, some newts. I think there were mandarin newts you could get. And there was a few specialist shops. And then I guess I sort of, got married and all that lot. And then after a couple of years, I said to my wife, I'm going to keep geckos. And there was a big thing, sort of, this is fast forward to sort of 93. And a lot of the geckos were wild caught stuff. They were basically brought in through bird people, like the parrot people and that. They would bring it through reptiles. And it was good and bad in some aspects. Like I remember sort of Solomon Island skinks crawling all over each other where there was like 60 in a tank. It was shocking. Or, Henkeli, Europlatus Henkeli, leaf-tailed geckos, where the walls of the tank weren't just covered in geckos. There was geckos laying on geckos because there were so many of them. So people weren't that keen on breeding back then because they were cheap. You could just get what you want from the shops. And then Jake come around. So I kept them for a while, and then I stopped for a little while when they were younger, and then I went back into it about 2006. Jake said, I want one gecko. I said to him, just one. That's all we're going to have. We're going to have one gecko, and that's it. No more. And I think I lied.
Oh, that's great.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool to see that you guys, have the relationship you do. Not that you wouldn't have the relationship you do based on animals, but it's good to see families brought together with their, shared love of animals and nature. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it can be a good thing or a bad thing. I will say that. Well, at some point, Jeff knows how to wind me up, and I know how to wind Jeff up. So
one day, think back on these times, Jake, and you're not going to want to trade them for nothing, man. And enjoy them. Take the good days with the bad, and realize that someday they're all going to be good.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you listen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right. So today we're talking. We're going to talk a couple of different species, but I think we're going to focus on from what I gather, your one of your favorite species is Pictus geckos. Jason will fill everybody in the scientific name. I have.
Oh, so can Wally. Wally, what's the scientific name? You want Nanette for this one?
Yeah. Hold on. Let me go to the internet for this one. Periodora picta. So I say that at reptile shows and people just give me that deer in a headlight, look, and I'll say, well, Madagascar ground gecko, oscillated gecko, and then reel off another 20 or 30 common names the Periodora picta has. But we all call it Periodora picta, Periodora pictus as well. You see either name interchangeable in the industry, in the hobby.
I'm learning already, guys.
All right. So what morphs are you currently working with, and so how did you actually get around to choosing those projects for your Periodors?
Well, it's interesting because, as I say, I've kept Pictus geckos are probably my favourite geckos. I don't know what it is about them, but they're charming geckos, and they're so simple. It shocks me that there doesn't seem to be more in the hobby. Full stop. Yeah. So I kept them in '93, 2008, and I've kept them since 2012. So in 2012, I got 10 pairs, wild caught pairs, and they were, some were normal and some were. Now, I'm not really a morph man, to be honest with you, so you're going to have to help me out here, Wally, with all this. But they were what we call hets. Hets that were the red ones, sort of reddish colour. So I think they're naturally occurring. We have a males now, which are the bright, sort of the orangey colour ones. But to be honest, the hobby's been fairly slow in the UK of picking up the different morphs. So, we used to sell hets at the normal price of normal Pictus geckos because people didn't really know what they were. So it's only now that there seems to be a hunger for males in the UK. I don't know what it's like in America, but that's what we're finding, isn't it? Yeah. Well, we've had males in the past and sold them for the same price as normals because people are, what's that? So it's slow in some ways. I think the hobby is slow in picking up different geckos, and all the geckos we keep, they are quite a common gecko, but we love them because of their character, the ease of them. When Jake first started, he used to pick up the Pictus gecko eggs and he used to crack them. Oh, don't worry, we've got a few more of them. Don't worry, Jake. And that was a great thing with Pictus gecko eggs. It's a great gecko to start, Yeah.
Well, that's a good little spin-off. If you don't mind me asking, if you could pitch Pictus geckos to a new keeper, what exactly would you tell them? What would you say this is the reason? I know you briefly touched on it, but these are the reasons you should check these geckos out as opposed to maybe a crested gecko.
Is that for me?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. I guess the temperament of them, they're not bitey. They're not going to take your fingers off. You can kind of hold them. The way they hold their heads, they've got their bodies on one plane and their heads like that, is really nice. The ease of breeding them, the ease of incubating the eggs. You can do things wrong with the eggs and you can still get them to come out. And then, even the babies, there's not that many fatalities in them. So they are an encouraging gecko to keep, and we sell them so that we can fuel our hobby for other rarer geckos, which, to be honest, sometimes you don't have success with at the start. And therefore you've got to buy into those geckos. It's expensive. And one of the ways we do that is by having the Pictus geckos to sell them. But yeah, they're just such an easy gecko to keep. They're very forgiving. The environment parameters are, you can vary them and you'll keep them alive in either. Well, some other geckos aren't as forgiving as that by a long shot. So, you get one thing wrong and that means the gecko's going to die,
Oh, yeah. Awesome. You want to put your spin on it, Wally?
I would tag on to that and pretty much exactly what I would say. We do a lot of reptile shows and we have crested geckos and leopard geckos and gargoyles and rare geckos, and we have Periodora picta. We get a lot of questions. Which I'm looking for a gecko. I want something family orientated. Which one should I get? So I'll talk about the benefits, the value of crested geckos. I'll talk about leopard geckos, and I'll talk about Periodor picta. Which is your favorite, Wally? Well, Periodor picta. Why is that? Well, I've kept over 150 different species of geckos, and Periodor picta are my favorite. Just exactly what Jeff had said. You know, I go about it two different ways, if I may. One, exactly what Jeff said. They're easy to keep. They, you know, we keep them over sand, very basic, and we keep them in a bioactive enclosure. We keep them tropical and arid at the same time, always providing a moist height, of course. But I mean, what other gecko can you keep over sand and in a bioactive? And they do fine either way. Terrestrial or arboreal, doesn't matter. We express, you know, the ease of care and the ease of breeding and the ease of raising the babies up, just like Jeff has said. They're the easiest animal. And eventually I get to the point of, you know, opening a cup and here, would you like to hold one? And it fits into the hand very nicely, even in small, you know, kids that come to our table, and it just sits there and the head comes up, like Jeff was saying, and the big, you know, nocturnal walleye eyes, if you fish, walleye eyes, and it just looks up at the people and it's like, oh, I'll take 100 of these. So it's a great beginner gecko. On the other side, I probably shouldn't point to this finger. So the second point is that for a breeder, oh my gosh. Okay, let's all go back about 20 to 25 years ago with leopard geckos. What's a good leopard gecko? Well, a nice carrot tail. What else? Well, there is nothing else. But there's kind of some white ones and some redder ones and some. We're right there. We're right there with Periodor picta. Why? Because not a lot of people are breeding them just yet. So in the hobby, you know, we have all of these different, and I wouldn't even call them morphs. You know, Jeff had mentioned about or Jake, one of you two had mentioned about the, you know, the males or the T plus albinos, the redder ones, pinkish redder ones, and that's kind of maybe the only morph that we have. Then we have all kinds of traits, you know, just like leopard geckos, traits, line bred traits, like, I don't know, 3 stripes and black eyes and the snows and the caramels and all of these other, and the reds without them being the T plus albino male reds. So if you're into a family gecko, Periodor picta. If you're into, do you want to get in on a breeding experience like leopard geckos all the way to the beginning of leopard geckos? Periodor picta.
Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
All right. So I got kind of a question for this goes pretty much for both the species we're gonna be talking about, really. And it's so when you're looking to get new stock, right, new blood or whatever, what are some things that you're looking for when you're looking to bring in another gecko, either you know, like the Periodor picta or the Chondrodactylus and Gulliver that we're gonna talk about a little bit.
Shall I go? I guess with all geckos, I think one of the things you need confidence in the person you're buying off, and because you bought stuff and we bought stuff of certain people in Europe for a long time, you kind of earned their trust, and they've earned your trust. So we would try to buy people that we know, and we try to buy. If we buy geckos, we try and buy sort of F1s or F2s, higher up the chain you can get. And you probably don't actually sort of get that kudos until you bought into people. In other words, you have to buy geckos off people for a long time before you start to get, I guess, into their good books. And then, you know, when you're offered rare geckos, that's great. You know, like we got some contacts, as I say, in Europe. And we're buying quite some rare geckos, and that's because they kind of trust us that we're not going to get them, and then next week we're going to say, oh, they died, don't know what happened, we want our money back, or it's your fault, because they know that they've got confidence we can keep them. And I guess at the start, if you're to buy into geckos, I would start with the easier species and the easier ones of that type of species. So if I was buying into Gonosaurus, I would buy the Hanius because they're the starter Gonosaurus gecko. And I think, one of the mistakes people make is they want to keep everything all at once, and it just becomes you need your experience with the easier ones, I guess. A bit like shaping the eggs, You got to start somewhere. But if you break one of those really rare gecko eggs, it's a little bit more.
Yeah.
I have a question just to kind of piggyback Jason's. Is there anything in specific you look for in the gecko? Are you looking for any specific, I don't know, maybe characteristics other than your basic healthy lizard? Are you looking at, I know we want reputable breeders, but is there anything you look at specifically when you're choosing your next gecko?
I think it depends on the species. So I think like with Pictus geckos, it depends. Like if you've got a couple of Pictus geckos at home and you're looking for a male, for instance, and like the females are quite dominant, then you think, right, okay, I want a dominant male. Otherwise, if I get a male that's not dominant, then he ain't going to quite do the business. And I think that's a lot with a lot of geckos is it varies on species, but if you've got like quite a dominant male and like a not dominant female, they can cause bullying and that kind of thing. So like dominance is a thing. So if you want, so you're kind of looking for dominance, thinking, will that match what I'm looking for? Or like head shape as well. And like the eyes, like if you got bug eyes or like bug eyes on geckos, it's normally a sign of poor genes.
The simple things like they've got all their toes, bright eyes, their structure looks good, their tail shape, hip bones,
size as well.
Just do they look right? Because I've been offered some geckos in the past and thought, I don't know about that one, and I've taken them because they're a swap, and I've learned from swaps, and that gecko's died quite shortly after. But we learn from our mistakes.
Okay. Definitely. Awesome. That's a great list of things, man. Awesome. Because so many other people, I mean, in the mainstream geckos, if you will, your gateway geckos, everybody's looking for a color, right? Like, I want this color to go with that color, and they totally miss the whole pairing thing, right? Like, the geckos have to get along. When you talk about a pretty common gecko like your Leachianus, I mean, it's just become common knowledge now that they don't all get along. Like, they'll just fight. But the people that keep them understand you have to have an equally dominant male to breed with the female, or she will just abuse him and want nothing to do with him. You have to find I don't know the word I'm looking for, but socially, mentally strong, dominant animal to pair with a like animal. It's not just the colors. There's so much more to pairing animals than what they look like. So thank you for touching on that, because I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Yeah. I'll follow up with another question. How many questions, let's say you're not dealing with a breeder that you've worked with in the past a lot. It's the relationship is brand new. You see a gecko, or you find it on Morph Market, you find the breeder, and you go to them to ask questions about that gecko. Let's say a Goniosaurus that you've never worked with, and you want to expand your cave gecko collection. Yeah. So you message them, hey, I saw that you had Orientalis, or whatever the new name is now, and you say, what do you have? Can you tell me how much do you ask without feeling like you're invading or not jeopardizing that trust? Do you ask, is this cave? Is it captive bred? Is it wild? Is it how long have you had them? How do they get along together? Have you bred them together? How do they do together? How far do you take that conversation? And 99% of the time, I'm assuming it's all email or direct message, but how far do you take that conversation without feeling like I'm kind of treading on trust here?
Yeah, well, that's a judgment call, I suppose, we've got to make with the person. Like, one of the mistakes we made in the past is to buy ham in Germany and buy people that don't speak English or won't speak English. And of course, you don't really know what you're buying into. So like it's very interesting because we was talking about this with the Gonosaurus orientis, or their whatever their new name is, because they are reclassified. But we sold quite a few pairs. Probably sold half a dozen or a dozen pairs over the. Well, we probably sold 20, 30 pairs over the years. But there's one lady that we remember, and she pestered us. What dust do you put on your crickets? The temperatures, is this size tank big enough? And what I can tell you is that lady bred them. And she's probably one of the few people in the UK that has done that. Yeah. Out of all the other people, one of the guys come back, oh, I lost my male. And he gave us this story. And I thought, I know what you did. You did what we told you not to do. But you knew better than us. Yes. And now that's dead. So I do really wish when we sell geckos, people would ask us more questions. So to answer your question, Wally, I suppose I think it's a good thing when people ask me, it's even simple things like, oh, what size crickets do you feed this gecko? Because you want to get that right from the start to reduce the stress of then, transportation and moving to where you are. So I think it's important to ask almost silly questions just so you know. And also sometimes you're asking questions you know the answer to, but you see how much information they know about what they're keeping. Is this pot luck that they've bred these geckos? Or, are they people that you feel that know what they're doing? I suppose that's an interesting question in itself.
And I think that, as you build a relationship, you become more comfortable with maybe asking those what you feel are silly questions, but the breeder might, you might have that relationship where they just ask whatever you want to ask. I'll relate a real quick story. At a show, reptile show, years and years at Tinley Park, I met up with Joe Hupp, and I had purchased several animals from him. And I walked up to a stable. I was looking at scorpion tail geckos, and I said, Joe, I don't know much about this, but I know that UV and heat are very important. How do you have your enclosures? Are you using a 10? Are you 5, a 20? And how do you have it so that you're getting the heat? And he said, okay, come here, Wally. And he's, people all around at his reptile show table. Come here, walk around the table, come here. And he got a pen and a piece of paper, and he drew out the structure of his enclosure and how he keeps bricks and the light. And so I've got this picture of this is exactly how Joe sets up his enclosure. And he probably spent 5 minutes drawing this. Again, his helper was helping with the geckos and sales and everything, but he took that time to walk through all of that with me. Mm-hmm. So, to your point, the more you feel comfortable and the more you build from getting animals from the same breeder, the more of that comfort level you develop, and the more willing they are to share information or more importantly, spend the time with you.
Yeah.
So I got just to fill in, right? Out of all you guys, Jason, Jeff and Jake and Wally, I'm probably the only one here that doesn't sell geckos, right? I am the consumer of the bunch. When I go to buy a gecko, right? What makes me feel comfortable is almost the lack of, how do I say this? Let me just be blunt. I don't want someone that gets frustrated with any question I ask. That the way someone goes about answering my question and welcomes more questions is what will absolutely make a buy-in or make me or break me buying an animal from a person. If you engage my questions and almost offer me more information as I'm asking you, you got me. You got me. When a seller is super reluctant to give information, it's no secret. A lot of guys out there today almost, they feel like someone buying an animal is competition, right? Like you're treating me like competition. You don't want to fill me in on your secrets because you don't want me doing what you're doing, right? All of you guys, and I know Jason didn't answer, but I know personally, like you guys are, from what you, Wally and Jeff and Jake have just said, are more than willing to offer and give you whatever question, and there's really nothing gecko related that you can ask them that's going to offend them. It's a legit question. And that is awesome for sellers. And I'm sure you guys all do great business because of it. And again, I'm a consumer. Never sold animals, never vended a show, never did anything like that. And from my side of the table, it's what someone, and I spend a lot of money on animals, man, like a lot of money. And when someone's going to spend that money, we look for things like that. We look for someone that's not going to take any of our questions as stupid or invasive or, you know, too much. You're never going to turn your cheek to a question I have to ask. And again, it's not a question, but more of a compliment to all four of you guys. You know, it's
Oh
it's
yeah,
awesome.
I mean, if a breeder doesn't want to answer your questions, you shouldn't be buying from them. That's the point.
Move on.
Yep, I've learned that the hard way already. Like I said, with my Silieris that I had, and she passed away, I learned it from a hard way that you know, if they can't give me the correct answers, I just need to move on. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
I find it frustrating when people don't ask you questions, to be honest with you, because you know you give that gecko to someone who say, "Do you know how to keep it yet?" Yeah, and you think, "No, I don't think you do," and they go away, and you feel frustrated because you think, "Is that gecko gonna, you know, is he gonna thrive?" Or you know, and really, although we're selling geckos, we want to see other people succeed with our geckos, and to see the hobby thrive, and not have somebody discourage, "Oh, I got a gecko and it died," because they're the people that come out the hobby. So you want people to succeed with your geckos, and yeah, people not asking questions. I kind of struggle with sometimes, you know.
oh, yeah, and I said I still keep up with a lot of the people that I sold geckos to. I still keep up with them. You know, I always ask like every few months, can I get an update? How's the gecko looking? Is everything going
Yeah.
right for you? Do you have any questions you need me to answer? I'm always here for you. I always tell them 24/7. I'm available. You know, just because I'm asleep, guess what? That message still goes through, and I'll probably wake up sometime in the night and boom, I'll start answering questions. So we had
What's your
this
phone number,
conversation
Jason?
before.
I'll give you a call
Yeah.
at 1 o'clock this morning.
Oh, I'll probably answer too.
I know you would.
So, uh, let's see. I mean, question. So about breeding, right? When is like when do you decide to? All right, they're ready to breed. Is it like you wait for them to drop their duds, or you just wait for them to hit a certain weight or a certain age? Jeff, sorry.
Um, well, it's interesting because with Pictus geckos, one of the things that always surprised me the first time I kept them is they can lay eggs from a tremendously early age. And one of the key points of breeding Pictus geckos, and I suppose Wally, you must do the same, is at that sort of 2-3 months is you separate them. You can sex them. You can see the big bulge underneath. The big-headed geckos is another name, but I could think they could be called something big, something else. Geckos, actually, so, you know, it's so very clear with these geckos.
Oh yeah,
and you need to separate them out. So we have 2 tubs, one of males, one of females,
Yep.
and you must keep them separate. I'd say at least a year, maybe more, depending on how they look, how they're doing. Would you say that's what you do, Wally?
Oh gosh. So what are the benefits of period or picta? This. What are the negatives? Oh, I know a negative. They breed at 2 months. Now, why is that a negative? Because the females will just get pounded by the males. Maybe I shouldn't have said that word. The attention, the male's attention, 100% will be on breeding, and they'll breed at 2 to 3 months of age. So, gosh, if there was one point in this whole discussion that is so critical with period or a picta, it's what you said, Jeff. Separate them as soon as you see that bulge on a male. So, at about a month and a half or so, every time I feed, and I feed every other day, every single time I go into my babies' enclosures when they're a month and a half of age, I look for males, and I look for males, and I look for males, and I look for males. And exactly when I see a male, it's into the male tub. It's into the male tub. It's into the male tub. Males do fine together. They don't really have that much aggression together. So I'll have a tub of a 15 quart enclosure with 4, 5, 6 males. If I can have 6 males in there, I'm not worried about it because they just don't show aggression. And I'll raise them up that way until I can sell them at shows. females do great together. So when I have a male, I separate it until the females, until about 4 to 5 months, and then I know that I pretty much have all females, and then I'll start looking at what am I going to keep, what am I going to sell, and so on. What am I going to hold back for a special project and move them into other enclosures? But oh my gosh, the one thing you really have to watch with Periodor picta is separate those males as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And I just want to add, really, the other thing that I think is really critical is calcium. And as soon as you get a female if it's young and it's trying to breed, it's shot to pieces because obviously a young animal, when it's growing or even losing its tail, is a big thing for them, because obviously they need the calcium to build a strong bone structure, as well as building this massive egg. And the size of Pictus eggs, for the comparison to their body size, it's big, and they're pumping 2 of these out maybe every 2 weeks. So calcium and having that calcium supply is really important.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have a question about breeding. If you're saying they're breeding at 2 to 3 months, and you have to take the males out, are they laying duds at 2 to 3 months, or will they not lay at all if there's no male around? Either of you guys, or whoever.
Go on, Wally.
They can, and they might not. It really depends. So if you have a male in there, the males are going to know that they're males before we know that they're males, obviously. So they possibly could be breeding even before then. So if they do, or even if they don't, you could have dud eggs in there. And here's the scary part, just like Jeff was saying before. 3 months of age, 3.5, 4 months of age, I've seen females lay good eggs, and these eggs are, if the Periodor picta is, a couple of inches long, these eggs are 2.5 inches long. No, they're not that big. They're about the size of a pea, though. And it almost, makes you cry seeing how big these little, eggs are coming out of these little Periodor picta. So sometimes they are duds and sometimes they're not. It really doesn't matter. You can tell the duds, you throw them away. The others, sometimes I'll incubate, sometimes I'll throw them away too, just because, like Jeff was saying before, you just get so many eggs from these Periodor picta.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I meant, I don't know, maybe I said the question wrong. If there's no males around, if you keep the males away, will it keep them from laying? Will it keep the females from laying?
Yeah. Yeah.
It does. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Because like some crested geckos, even if there's not a male around, they're laying every month regardless. So when we were talking about calcium, I'm like, they must be beating them up with the calcium if they're laying and just laying from that old. You got to hammer them little guys with the calcium. Huh. All right, but if you keep the males away, the females typically will hold off laying eggs in general.
Typically. I'd like to go back, though, to the whole supplement point. And guys, how do you provide supplements to your Periodor picta?
Well, we use a Repeshe Calcium Plus product.
High Cal,
which I don't know if you get that in America, do you?
Yeah, we do.
That is fantastic stuff. I've heard people, like breeders in America, where they've just used, not in America, in Europe, where they've used just normal low cal, and they've just completely failed that whole season. It is so critical, I think, to get the good, because the trouble is that stuff is hard to get in the UK. I don't know what it's like, but if you go into a pet shop in the UK, they try selling you a product called Nutribol, which was something that I used back in the 90s. And, we moved on from that in a way. That's how I see it. And that Repeshe is an excellent product. Yeah. And I really believe that some of our successes is from that. And of course, I guess we're talking some of the basics here, but obviously cricket supplementation, what you're feeding your crickets and your live food is really important as well. So you're feeding the tube with nutrition in it and good stuff in it than just an empty tube. It's just legs and head and that, I guess.
Is that with D3 or without D3? That with Apache calcium?
Well, I use without D3.
Okay,
If
so
I'm
are
going
you
to
giving
put
them
calcium in there, I
are
kind
you
of.
giving them UVB?
On the Pictus, no, we
No.
don't.
Okay.
But we have like a mealworm dish, so that's just like filled with calcium. So like the mealworms are all running around because you can't give too much calcium, but you can give too much D3. So
In fact, often we sprinkle calcium around the tank like it's snowing. You know, because you see, calcium is the most common mineral on Earth. So it's extremely easy for a wild Pictus gecko or any gecko to obtain calcium. But of course, when we put them in our nice little sterile tanks that we've got with nice clean sand or peat, that is lacking, really lacking. So, you know, most of our geckos, we sprinkle calcium like a snow in them because it's just something that they must have.
well, you see them, they like walk around, and if you spray the tank, they'll like lick the bark or the sticks and stuff. And if you got calcium on there, it gets wet in it. So it's a good way of just adding in extra. But I mean, I think with D3, we've tried in the past with other geckos, and I think our note taking is shocking. We'll hold our hands up. So with like D3, I feel like you need to be really quite calculated in your measurements of what you're giving what. And I think we're too scatterbrainy. So we've done it in the past with like different geckos, and then the egg's like arm piercing where it's had too much D3. So it's
I think D3 is you can overdo D3, but you cannot overdo calcium.
Okay.
So yeah.
So another point a lot of people don't know is you can absolutely overdo D3. There's toxic levels and bad levels of D3, not calcium. Other than I guess I've heard a couple species where their calcium sacs will get so big they suffocate, but awesome fact. People just think it's the same thing, and there's drastic differences between the two.
Oh yeah.
I like that you threw in the mealworm cup, and we provide mealworm dishes I'm trying to think, I guess just about everybody other than our New Caledonia crested geckos and gargoyles. Well, we have, diet or mealworm dishes in our gargoyles too. But we kind of do the same thing, Jeff, but what we'll do is we'll provide the dish with straight calcium so that they always have that source of calcium.
Yeah.
And then about twice a month, we'll dust their crickets. But we feed a lot of mealworms. But about twice a month, we'll dust crickets and mealworms with the calcium with D3. And I feel that that's a benefit that they need. But the calcium, not having calcium is a critical mistake. Let me ask this. Do you use any other kind of vitamin supplements?
The simple answer is no, really.
Okay.
Like we sometimes use critical care, which is I think it's a parrot supplement really from VetArc, and sometimes if something's looking not too great, we would
it's like a food stimulant.
It's a food stimulant. It's actually an appetite stimulant, so we would use that for any gecko. I guess we would try to use that. And that really can help stuff, especially if it's, having a bad time. So we try to put that on a stick, a coffee stirrer to be precise. And don't make that damp and then stick it in there and then make it so it's a sort of sludgy thing and then stick it on their lip so they will force them to have that. That's high in calcium. We have tried using the Repeshe rescue cow in the past, but that's very gloopy. I don't know why it's a gloopy.
I think the best supplement,
struggled with
the best like calcium supplement we ever used was a thing called Moon Drops. And it come in like this little pipette, and that was really good. But they stopped making it because it was
so strong.
It was so strong, so you could like kill your gecko if you gave it too much of this.
Okay.
But honestly, that was brilliant. Like if a gecko had like a kinked tail, like a Parador pictus, for instance, You just give it like one. I remember this as a kid. You'd give it like one drop on its nose. It would have that, and then over the next couple of days, this tail just straightens out completely.
So you can get liquid calcium now, which we've got that as well that we use in a pipette. So we'd use that on some geckos. Yeah. It's funny because as I'm talking, I'm remembering more what we do. I sort of think, we only do this, but no, we do a few other things as well. There you go.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question just kind of off tangent, but kind of on tangent? Anthony, you deal with New Caledonia. You deal with Chihuahuas. Chihuahuas are notorious for laying eggs and needing calcium. How do you handle that situation? Have you ever had a sign of MBD? Oh my gosh, the tail is crinkling a little bit. I better do something. How do you handle that extra calcium need for your New Caledonians? I know this isn't, this is a little bit off topic, but it's kind of on topic too.
I avoid it before it ever happens.
Yes.
Jason will tell you I worried about this and would pester him for months before my Chihuahua started laying, and I vowed to literally never have it happen. So I did a lot of research about New Caledonia, more than most people would. I mean, into substrate, and what the soils are probably made up of, and it ultimately boils down to limestone, high calcium, blah 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 blah, coral limestone. Everything in New Caledonia equates to high calcium. So I do the same in my terrariums. I feed snails. I put liquid calcium in their food. Like Jeff and Jake were saying, I feed my feeders on extremely high quality foods. I just get the calcium into them nonstop. They continually have a source of calcium going into them. And I've never seen a wave in a tail, a sink in a hip, a nothing. Now I got 7 pairs, and I've gotten eggs out of 3 of them so far, but nothing.
Good.
Nothing yet. And I just, again, I believe in just giving them the supplementation before the problem arises. Like I said, I give everything a super high calcium diet. I use mineral blocks too. You'll see them on my Instagram, but I posted, they use them for hermit crabs and other things, but they're kind of like a mineral lick for a horse, for livestock, but they're little ones, and they're calcium carbonate and all types of other stuff. And I have absolutely seen my Chihuahuas licking them, and I just stick a little cube. They're maybe, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch cubes. They look like a little dice, and they're just a mini calcium lick. And I just put them in there, and even if they're not eating them, they're in there for the, I do loose live feeders, so Chihuahuas love to hunt. Everything that comes in contact with those things, everything in the Chihuahua's life cycle has access to calcium at all times, if that makes any type of sense.
Perfect.
Ongoing experiment, but thus far I haven't had it.
Anthony, in the UK, we've kept mossy geckos and bred them for quite a few years, but people would feed silkworms quite a bit because they're very high. Is that something that you do?
I tried it once. I'm not going to lie to you. I tried it once, and some of them took it. Some of them loved them. The others would take a bite and literally swing them out of their mouths as fast as they could shake their head. So I do feed a very diverse group of feeders. Like, that's without a doubt. It's just, unfortunately, I think I tried silkworms a little too late in life, that they're not the norm to them, and they just some take them, some don't. If I wouldn't, I don't want to say I wouldn't feed them again, but we had a guest on from Beast Mode Silks East or West, and she runs a silkworm company. She sells silkworm feeders. Awesome person, awesome business. She sent me hundreds, if not thousands, of these things, and I couldn't keep the damn worms alive. Like, they were just dying on me. I tried everything. I'm on YouTube watching videos. I'm reading her care sheet. Like, what did I do wrong? What am I doing wrong? Like, I just couldn't figure it out, man. And there's not been many things I haven't been able to keep alive. Silkworms have given me a run for my money. But I have heard nothing but great things. Nothing but great things. I have seen the printouts of the food breakdowns of all feeders, and silkworms are absolutely at the top of the charts. I would never try to deter anybody from feeding them. Just because mine don't eat them, I would always encourage people try silkworms or use silkworms if their animals will take them. I don't have a bad word to say about them. You know, kudos to the people that can get their animals to eat them. You know, awesome.
You just gotta treat those geckos like your kids. Like, you know, of course they're not gonna eat the broccoli the first time around, but guess what? You keep giving them that broccoli, they're going to eventually eat it. You know, especially like with your babies that you're about to have, those chihuahuas. Like eventually, like you start them off early on those, they'll love them. I said, no. She gave me some samples as well. I said, I think about 90% probably took them. I had to feed some of them. I fed them again, just the ones that spit it out. Next go around, gave it to them again. Let them like, nope, you're going to get them. I got a ton of these. This is what we're eating this week. So I mean, eventually they did eat them. I said, I love silkworms. I said, like, like Ant said, they're on the top of that food chart as far as nutrition. So might as well go ahead and try to give them the best nutrition I can, right?
I tried. My ones that spit them out, at least the first time they bit them. The second time they just looked at me like I was a piece of crap. They didn't even touch them. Smelled them and looked at me like it was actually not for nothing, but one of the things that made me realize how intelligent a Chihuahua actually is it could bite something, realize it didn't like it, and 2-3 days later know exactly what that smell was and not even to touch it. Now I could take that silkworm and put it down and take a orange head roach or a dubia or a super worm, smashing it. They're destroying it, you know? So it made me realize, like, they're not stupid. Like, they you know?
I have a thought on that with the Chihuahuas. If you do try silkworms again, and I've got to admit that I used to raise chameleons for about 3 or 4 years. And oh my gosh, did the chameleons love silkworms. But with the Chihuahuas, my geckos don't, just like you, Anthony, my geckos, I don't know, give me the other stuff. But next time you try, I think we lost Anthony. I'll wait on this. Go ahead and next time you try the silkworms, try dusting them in crested gecko diet first and then feeding them.
Say do that.
Yeah, right. Just that aroma, that smell.
I never would have thought.
Yeah, because I actually listened to a podcast with Joe Hupp in it, and he said because he got a lychee from somebody that would only take diet, and then he dipped a pinky into the dusted diet, and it ended up like the lychee took it. So all it takes is a little effort, little ingenuity, make it seem like it's the flavor that they like, and get that close to them, they'll take it up.
Chocolate covered silkworms.
I'm sure they eat them in some country. I didn't realize people ate them until I started like looking up what I was doing wrong to keep them alive. More things probably popped up about people eating these things and them being like an Oriental delicacy than I could find out how to keep them alive. More recipes to cook them.
The next show that you do, I want to see that. I want to see a chocolate covered silkworm, and I want to see you munching on it.
We wait together.
All right. All right. Y'all ready to get into some Chondrodactylus? I'm ready for this one. All right, Jake. What does their natural habitat look like, and what is like their geographic range?
They're quite a widespread species. You know, they go from the west coast of Namibia. I think I'm saying that right. Namibia. From the west coast down into the top part of South Africa, all the way down that coastline. And some are found in like Botswana, in like the bottom corner of it. So yeah, I mean, the Namibian desert is quite a rough environment. you know, that 1,000-mile coastline,
harsh environment.
That's what the word. That like 1,000-mile coastline. That's like, you know, it's just sand. You get the sea mist or the water, like humidity comes in daily, like evening and dusk. You know, but I mean, they're not just found on the coastline; they're found all throughout. So I think that on where they're found in like locationally really does determine their behaviour a little bit more. You know, I think that the ones that live in the more harsher environment are probably a bit more tougher than something that probably lives in South Africa, what's a little bit more richer in life than the middle of the Namibian desert, where it's probably just, you know, it's like 45 degrees, I think it gets there.
Can do.
So, so I think that's just like there geographically. So a lot of it's just sand, you know, they just live in the sands, might go in rocks. But I'm quite convinced as well that in the wild, they would eat everything. So I'm convinced they eat geckos as well, like smaller, like sand geckos or
ranger, Pachydaxus ranger.
Yeah, well, I'm convinced because they live in the same area. I'm convinced that they would eat them because they're easy food source. I think as well, like I don't know this, like I can't say that I've been there and seen it, but I'm quite convinced they would go in like old like rat holes or something like that to hide because they're a big gecko, maybe, who knows? But they're quite like bolshy in their behaviour. But I mean, one thing that we're kind of starting to do is the different. I mean, location, forms, depends how you really want to say. I say forms.
Shall I just interrupt here, Jake? Because I guess what Jake is going on to say is a bit like I kept panthers back in the 90s, and panther chameleons come in two forms, like a browny one or a reddish one. And people didn't have the understanding that we got now with the different forms. And what people doing is getting a blue one and a red one, breeding them together and getting a bluey red one that were actually infertile. And obviously now with, you know, you talk about panther chameleons, you talk about, you know, is this a nosy fillet or is this a nosy bee or an Amjammer form? And they're all very much known about and understood the different forms. So back to you, Jake.
So I think the thing is with the Agrophora, when they've been brought in, obviously, I mean, like certain people brought them into Europe, you know, you could quite tell their forms of where they're from. But I think now it's all a little bit mixed up. So I think one thing we're trying to do is I've literally just done this through the geckos we've kept, you know, because we've got lots of different colours. And I'm thinking, well, hang on a sec, that one's really dark brown. This one's like a yellowy white. Like, you know, that can't be in the same geographical range. And I was talking to I can't remember his name now. Some wildlife photographer. And he was saying that the different forms, they're all classed as the same species, but the different forms are based off the sand colour. So if you go to like the west part of Namibia, it's like the sand's quite dark there. I think from like, if you look at like photographer photos of like where they are. That's the northern part are more like browny, yellowy kind of colours. And then you get, when you go into like the middle part of Namibia, like southern middle area, they're like a lot lighter in colour, a lot more yellows.
That's awesome.
And then when you go into like the South African forms, I mean, they're still classed as Chronodax agrophora. This springbok form, that's just like a location. It's quite close to Nambia land, this guy was saying. And there they basically have like the high reds and the whites there. And then you get like the forms from like the northern capes that have like really quite dark black on them. So it's purely just down to soil types.
And really. The Botswana ones, isn't there?
Oh, then the ones found in Botswana, to be honest, if anyone listening knows anything about the ones in Botswana, let me know, because there isn't much recorded there at all. So it's very hard to get an opinion.
Even the photographs are scant.
Yeah.
Or non-existent.
Non-existent. But I would say that the photography-wise, that stuff in South Africa is quite well documented. where the stuff in Namibia is kind of documented, but not too much. The ones in like the little part of Botswana that I found is not so much at all.
Do you want to show some?
So I've got some. If you want to see some,
Oh yeah, bust them out.
I'm not going to get them out because they will bite my fingers off. Let's see if I can do this. So this is a fully grown male.
Okay.
Oh wow, that's a decent sized gecko.
Yeah,
Let's get it. So if you look at this, see, because he's quite a darker colour. No, leave him. Because he's like the dark colour, we would say that this is like the more ones found in the northern part of Namibia. I don't want to put my finger in because he will eat it. Oh.
Who's a pen?
But he's ready. He's ready already.
That'll make a good thing. I'd love him being bitten by
no, he won't. I'm not getting bitten by one. But yeah, so he's more of the darker colorations. And then you get the ones that are, well, we would argue are the southern one, like the ones found in the lower part of Namibia. And these are like, of course, he's not fired up, but these are a lot more lighter in colour. And the white spots, the ones in the middle of the desert, because there's another form, the Chronodactylophora nabesis.
Yeah.
And they're a different subspecies, but they basically, their white spots are really quite small. So I would say that the ones in the southern form, because they're quite close in relation to each other, they got quite small white spots. And actually, with this one, we've noticed that when you breed them, the males at 6 months old will develop the white spots, where the South African form and the ones from the northern part will show, or northern part of Namibia will show their white spots from birth. But the southern form, or the lighter yellow ones, after 6 months they don't show their spots. And then this is the Springbok, or the Nambia land ones, and these are the South African. So these are a bit more redder. Yeah. Obviously, you got the black on these around their spots.
That dark black there.
The dark black. But with the males on these, we've noticed that the black goes around the spots. If you can see that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whereas like a female, I've got a female here, and this is what can be quite confusing with them, is you got, see, this is a female, but if you look, she's got kind of white spots. So when they're really young, the babies of this form look like males, and then you look underneath the tail, and you're like, well, that one ain't got any hemipines, where, so can you see the kind of whitish around the? Careful, Jeff. Yeah, so but that's a female because it hasn't got any balls. But and a couple of our breeders look like this, and they produce eggs. So I think it is due to the soil types from the different forms. So yeah, I've got some babies as well.
I'm going to show the cross.
Oh yeah, and then this one's a bit. This one we got off someone, and he's like a cross between the two form, like from a South African form and something that's probably in Namibia, would guess. But if you look at the size of him, he's about 3 years old now. But can you see the size difference compared to the other ones?
Oh yeah, that one's small.
Yeah, so like genetically, we think this one's not that great. So this is why we're kind of looking at these forms and thinking, is it a bad thing to be? Do you get what I'm saying? Is it a bad thing to try crossing these forms? I know this has already been done in the hobby already, but I think
it's like the Panthers, isn't it? The red and the blues mixing together.
Yeah, where you get like
Patience and brilliant. It's amazing that you guys are doing that. I can only imagine so many people would, kind of like Leachianus. I mean, I know they're called them different, but like locales people just mix whatever together because they think they're the same species and they'll get whatever. But you get the best, strongest animals by keeping those locales with their locales. I mean, it's awesome guys are doing that, man. Awesome.
Yeah, so it's just something which we're just seeing at the moment because we've got
show the babies.
Oh yeah, I've got some babies as well. So these are like, so this is like the normal ones from Namibia. You can see like he's quite dark brown, that kind of colours. You know, and then these are a spring or the South African form, and this is a male. And see, can you see he's got quite small white spots, but can you see the black on him, on his shoulders? It's quite cool. And then we've got this one that I'm fairly certain could be a female, but I need it to get a bit bigger before I can prove my theory. Because, yeah, it's got the white spots, but the spots on the shoulders aren't like a fully developed round spot. If that makes sense, it's more of like a obtuse,
and
like a.
The South African form is really beautiful. They're not firing up, but they go really red.
Yeah.
You can see on our page how red they get, and the pictures we take of these aren't doctored at all.
Not edited or
they're not added colours. We don't do that. But that, you know, they are really something. She's going to talk about the.
Yeah. So I think that's for like the different like forms. I mean, this is something we're just trying to gather evidence on, and just kind of prove that there are a difference. Because I think that, you know, if you said to people who breed panther chameleons that you're crossing between nosy flay, and they'd be like, "What are you doing that? You know, that's disgraceful." But I think that, you know. Well, I think now that Chrononaxis agrophora are getting a bit more, especially within Europe, they're a little bit more common than, you know, about 5 years ago. So I think that I think that people now are in a place to kind of sit down and think, right, okay, let's try to distinguish between the different colours and the forms.
Just the same as the panthers at the start, to, you know, what they are now, established in the hobby as different forms. And we believe you're going to see different.
I think people just like not different forms, but people will say, "Oh, this one is like a bit like you were saying, Anthony, with the Leachiana. It's like locale specific."
Yeah.
But
locale might be a better.
Yeah,
word.
that's the best. Not forms. Locale's a better word.
Guys, how much in the hobby do you think? So I'm working with Angulifera or Angulifera as well. I had no idea. I had a little bit of an idea about the different color forms, but oh my gosh, the information that you guys just provided is golden. How much do you think people don't realize about these animals? I mean, you know, about 15, I'll mention real quick, about 15 years ago, this was one of the animals right at the top of my dream list. And I just got them about 3 years ago, and I just started breeding them. And I couldn't be happier. And I'm realizing that I have the southern form, and real happy about that. But how much do you think breeders don't know this information, or kind of know it, but they're not sure how, which results in possibly breeders maybe crossing the locales maybe? What's your thoughts? Have you talked to other breeders about this?
We spoke to a few. I spoke to a guy in Europe. He was quite big into them a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I need to chat to him more, because I think that we've got a lot of them. So we've got a lot to kind of. I think what happens is a lot of people just have a pair or maybe two pairs. So I don't think they can fully grasp what we're kind of saying. But
you have a lot of, and like the ones we originally got were definitely the darker.
They were the darker form. But I think, to be honest, it would be nice to get connected with some people who have done herping tours in all of these places to kind of gather, or even, I mean, I ain't got the time to do it myself. It'd be nice to.
But it's a kind of a working sort of almost a theory, isn't it?
It's a theory. It's not a proven thing, because I think there's probably more people out there that know more about it, but maybe aren't sharing it. And that's the reason we're talking about it, is we want people to come together and say, well, you know, I've got these and I've got that. So we can kind of all share information and build on something.
Yeah. And try to develop a picture like we have in the Panthers of the different morphs of them, forms of them.
Yeah.
But we do think that South African ones, and this might be a bit more controversial, we do kind of, they are different, aren't they? Do you want to?
But yeah, their behaviour is a lot different. So they're like, so the ones from Namibia, we found that like in breeding, for instance, because I think because they live in such a harsh environment, they will their first year of breeding, put the male in, all's going well. She'll lay a clutch of eggs, and then after that, they either will carry on laying their clutches of eggs, or after their first clutch, they stop eating, don't lay any more clutches for the season, and then they go off their food, well, until basically they kill themselves. So yeah, so and then basically what you've got to do is you then got to like not force feed them, but you got to, you know, give them wax worms like every other day, and you're trying to encourage this female to eat. And that's like the Namibian forms, where the South African forms seem to be a lot more bullish. You know, they seem to have a bit more gutso about them. So like females, I can say that you put a male in there, and they seem to, like, because we got a few of them, they seem to be able to defend themselves a lot more, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that each, and this is another thing, each gecko of the Agrophora, they have their own personalities as well. So you can get like a shy male or a dominant female, and it's really important to establish what you've got for breeding.
And it's the jaw structure. You sometimes get these, they've got really big sort of jaws here.
Like their neck muscles.
They look stronger. They look like bulldogs. And they're often a very aggressive males. And you've got to go on.
Yeah, you've got to put them with the quite an aggressive female. Otherwise, he just bullies her. You know, steals all the food and mates with her too much. So it's getting a balance, you know. So and the reason we got so many is we kind of got more males than females because we pair up to do with like the personalities. So if we've got like a dominant female, we'll put like a dominant male in. But if we got a female that every time we go in the tank, she runs to the back of the tank or she's scared, then we put like a really timid male in there because you know that he's not going to pester too much. So, yeah, I kind of lost track of where we was on the question, but
no, you're all good. So, Wally, what's what has been your with the contracts and go for? What has been like? So you got them like 3 years ago. How has your process been with them so far?
I kept them separate, and I'd like to go back at some point and just kind of, if you guys wouldn't mind describing your enclosures, you know, how you have them set up. But I've had them separate until just this late spring, early summer. They got along very well. They mated, and I have one set of eggs so far. You know, fingers crossed and everything. But exactly what you're saying from the southern form, I'm guessing that's what I have. I have to talk to the breeder now and find out for sure. I think it's just spot on. They got along very well. I kept them together for 2 or 3 days, and then I pulled the male apart, away from each other for a week, put them back together, and right away, you know, female was very receptive. Male did what he needed to do, and I pulled them away again. It seemed fairly easy process for me. So it's interesting, you know, the dominant and aggressive, and that's really surprising because mine were so easy, but I can see that from the different locations, that maybe that's, especially if, you know, they're not coming together that often in the wild, maybe that's something to consider with the different locations. Great point.
Total sense.
Yeah.
So
we kind of,
I would say, out of all those localities, which ones are the most aggressive in your opinion?
probably the ones from Namibia. I would say like the darker ones seem to be more
Yeah.
like, I think they're more keen, like when you're in the tank, like, I mean, all of them will try to bite your fingers.
But they've been the most problematic to
like for females
to keep alive, in fact,
Yeah.
because some of the females that were kept on the have, you know, started laying eggs and they're just deteriorated and they've got just so stressed out.
I think in the wild they will literally lay a clutch because the environment's so harsh. I think they just literally lay a clutch, die, and then the life cycle goes on. You know, where I think that the South African location, because South Africa's quite rich, isn't it? It's in ecological system and the environment there. I think they live a much richer life. I mean, it's still harsh. It's a desert, isn't it? But it's just there's a lot more insects. There's a lot more humidity. A lot more
microclimates.
Yeah, that's the right word. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that yeah.
But they are individuals, and you've got to pair them correctly, and that's why having lots of males is a real good breeding strategy that we've found.
Okay.
I think you can get lucky. Like you can, like with you, Wally. Like you got two, and they just got on really well. You know, and we got yeah, and that's good. You know, and normally that kind of stays. That doesn't really change, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like we've got other people who keep them, and they kind of just said, "Oh, I don't really get what you're saying because I've got a pair and it seems to get on fine." You know, and you think, "Oh, is it just us?" And then you talk to other people, and they're like, "Oh no, I paired them up, and the male killed the female within like a month." And you're thinking, you know, so they are quite individualistic.
Yeah, you know the word.
Unique.
There's a lot of mixed locales in the hobby. Do you think a lot of people have watered them down, if you will? Yeah.
Yeah, massively. I don't.
The aggression and the different breeding behaviors out of them when people just make this big mixing pool. So the way you guys are running your system, keeping them in different locales like that, again, I am so impressed. Amazing.
Yeah.
Off to both of you. That is super damn cool. But I can say this, in America, I can't imagine anyone, I'm sure there is people, but I can't imagine that's anyone's point of interest, if you will. Some people are just, I imagine people wouldn't really care. If they could get a pair to breed, that's getting a pair to breed. They're not putting the emphasis that you guys are on keeping these locales pure. And I think that's the future, man. I think what you guys are doing is super admirable. Like I'm amazed that you guys have made those observations and dedicated your operation to keeping them together like that. I'm just afraid that in America, maybe, and I'm not saying yours are, Wally, but in America, maybe that people aren't having issues because they have watered down locales, if you will, and they're just used to becoming these animals that breed in bins and not closer to their wild descendants, I guess, if any of that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing we can say is the one that we think is a mix is the most highly strung, stressed male by far that we've got.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know if that's just
the personality,
an individual gecko that's a bit more strained than other people, other geckos, but we can't prove what we think is correct there. Because we only got one, but maybe other people could chip in and say something. We'll be more than happy to hear people, their opinions or what they think. But yeah, like I know with the Panthers, when people mix them, the fertility massively dropped off. I don't know. Is that the same with these? Who knows? We don't know at this point in time, but I kind of think that our gut feeling is you've got to keep these separate colours from the sand type, say, separate, and getting sort of a blue and a pink one maybe might not be the best thing in the future. I guess it's the same with leopard geckos. It's genetics were strong. I don't know if we know if the genetics are strong enough on these to produce hybrids and them to successfully breed and produce good young. We don't know.
That's what we're trying to just see, really. If we can prove, because at the moment it's purely just a theory and talking of like different wildlife photographers. So if we're just trying to
people that bred them and imported them in.
Yeah. So we're just trying to see that.
I think it's a really good theory, though. I really do. And to Anthony's point, I think that we have two different issues working there as far as mixing these all up. We know that, Chihuahuas came in, mainland and Pine Island, but maybe there was a third one and we didn't know. And even Pine Island and mainland, maybe that's all mixed together at this point. We don't know. We don't know what the beginner breeders were doing. To your point about, we're working toward trying to keep everything separate. I think so, but are we going to lose that early? I think that from 5 years ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago, these animals weren't around. They just weren't around at all. And now, Jake, Jeff, you have how many different pair, and that's pretty special. So they're becoming more kept in the hobby, but are we losing that ability to separate out the locations? And at some point they're just all muddied up completely. And your second, because people don't know. But to your other point, Anthony, I think maybe even if some people did, they wouldn't care and they'd just mix. I come from the tropical fish hobby, where I was working with some species that in Lake Tanganyika, Tropheus, where there were islands under the water, humps, and one hump, the animals would look different than the next hump, 500 yards away. I mean, totally different. So in the tropical fish hobby with those Tropheus, everybody knew. And if you bought a Tropheus morai, you bought it with that location name as well, so that you could identify it. If you saw Tropheus morai, the very first question you're asking is what location. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to pass right now, if you don't mind. And you go on to somebody that does know. So I think it seems like we're so early on with this. Unfortunately, the waters might be getting muddy without us even knowing it.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, because I kept crested geckos back in 1997, and they were really like, there were 3 people that brought them in from the UK into the UK, and of course when we first got the crested geckos, they were just one colour. But what was really interesting, I had some, and I wish I took pictures of them, but they were khaki green. Now that colour has been completely bred out of crested geckos. I love someone to get these pure form in because the colours of them, with this green, was wonderful. But they've been bred out of the hobby. And when I hatched crested geckos back in sort of 98, they were bright red when they hatched out. There's a picture. There's a book, a Crimea book of Rhacodactylus. It's a black covered book, and it's got a picture of 2 crested gecko hatched out, and it's brick red. Is it that book here? We're going to see it. That's not right. That one. It's the Crimea one. That's a black cover with 2 crested geckos with no tails on. And there's a picture in there of a crested gecko that's completely brick red, and that's the colour they hatched out at. But you don't get that now. So obviously something along the line has changed with at least crested geckos. Is this going to happen with these? We don't know.
Yeah.
With guys like you working on it, Wally, you guys, I mean, I'd love for this to turn into something that the hobby watches and other breeders pick up, and you guys collaborate and get together and stop it. If you guys can put all your information together and work something out to where you guys link up and, form a little alliance and keep them right. I mean, I think that it should be done. I think that if there's a distinction between the locales and more than just appearance, but behaviors and genetic strength and breeding habits and blah, someone's got to take a stand and start, letting it be known and take charge, and I think that this is a great start. You two together, to keep extremely rare geckos. I mean, this is an awesome start. I think that it's, you guys can do it, man, and it should be done with just the little observations that Jeff and Jacob said. I mean, you guys are clearly onto something. Nature is smarter than we will ever be. Nothing she does is by accident. Okay, it's you guys. I think you're onto more than a theory, but yeah, I'd love to see what you guys can do. Between Wally, Jeff, and Jake, I'd love to see what you guys, do collectively. Two of you together working on one species is great. Now you got three of you doing it. Let the circle grow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something. So before breeding season starts for them, right? What are you doing to get them ready for that season prior? As they're when they're younger. You know what I'm saying?
So we do like winter cooling is really important for them. So we do it like we pair them up in like February, March, late February, early March, and then for like the cooling. And we like when we first kept them, people said you need to keep them above 40 degrees,
above 45
degrees
on the hot spot.
On the hot spot.
And that's
but we found
Celsius, right?
Yeah,
which is really hot.
Yeah. But we found that they got really sluggish. So we keep ours at about 35, 40-ish. But I mean, when it comes to like the winter cooling, we in September we'll start dropping the temperatures every week by about 2 degrees, and then November. Is it the end of November or the start?
Start of November, we stop feeding.
Yeah, we stopped feeding our stuff, and then the temperatures have got down enough. So it's about 22-ish in the day, 16 degrees at night. And then for December, we do 4 weeks of deep cooling. So that's like, what type of temperature? It's like 18 to 16 degrees with no food.
But because we've got one room and we're trying to do multiple things in this room, we actually the first time we did it, we took the females out of the tank and put them in a smaller tank in Jake's room. It's not a reptile room, it's just a normal room. And some of the females got so stressed with that, we lost some, didn't we?
Yeah.
So what we decided to do is actually literally pick the tanks up and move them into the room so they don't get stressed. So they go with the tank.
So in December, I'm
He's got all these glass tanks on the floor in his room.
So I'm like, tiptoeing around with these glass tanks, and at night I can hear all this sand scratching at the side. But then, like in January time, then we bump the temperatures up, come out the cool. But we try not to, because we done it last year. We come out the cooling too quick, and that really whacks the geckos. So you got to do it gradually almost. But normally February, March, we kind of we'll pair them up. But we just put them in this season. I put them in just once at the start of the year for a week, and that was it. We didn't put them together since then.
Oh.
But I mean, some of this is why we're talking about the different locations, is the South African's done fine, the Bolivian one's done fine, but some of the southern Bolivian ones, they some of the eggs at the start of the season were fertile, and then at the end they're all infertile. So I mean, maybe it's just the female, maybe it's just the male. I don't know, but I mean, once or twice at the start, maybe 3 times if you want. But we keep all ours separate.
I think we're going to do what Wally does. We'll put them in twice.
Yeah, we'll put them in twice.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip there, Wally.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So for everybody that doesn't do Celsius, so when they said 16 to 18, that's around 60 degrees, which is, it's not bad. That's definitely not bad. It doesn't give me anxiety for leaf tail, for Phylloris and Nicola. When my friends show me, look, it's 43 degrees in his tank. I'm like, dude, that gives me so much anxiety just thinking about that. So how long do they go off food for? What did you say again about that one?
So like in December, well, in November we stop feeding, and then we won't feed them till January. So it's about like
We get 6 weeks of
no
deep cooling.
Yeah, 6 weeks of no food.
Yeah, that's a good hard cool down right there.
Yeah.
Is that what you do, Wally, or do you do something different?
Again, I haven't cooled mine because they were juveniles. So this is the first year. And I don't normally do that with geckos before they start breeding. I don't do a cool down. Now,
we don't.
Right. So I was over patient. I had talked to a fellow, last spring about, is it ready? They're about this size. And he looked at me and said, for a gecko like that, do you really want to gamble on pairing them off? If you think that maybe, if you're asking the question, should you put them together or not? You really want to take that gamble that maybe they're not. So I thought if I wait another year, that's really not a big problem and it's safer for the animal. So now that they're super, ready to breed, I paired them off this year. So I will do exactly what you say at the end of this season and cool them down and stop feeding, just like my other geckos.
Yeah.
Can you go
But
over
keep them in the same
setup?
tanks. That's the key as well, because the females, we have lost females where they get stressed if you put them in a new environment. So, yeah.
Okay. And can you guys go over your setup or what they kind of look? Or no, I do want to hear like the differences between your guys's and Wally's, how your guys' setups look.
Well, we actually at the moment we're doing it in two different ways. So we've tried. So we've got like a couple of females in glass tanks.
So they're probably 40 centimeters wide or 400 millimeters, and they're 600 millimeters deep.
So quite deep tanks in like a glass tank. But we used them. These glass tanks were used for another species. But we have probably like a quarter of the tank at the back of the tank it's got like a glass lip, probably about like inch and a half ish, and that's just filled with sand. So that provides them to dig, and they seem to poo a lot more in that area, didn't they? In the deeper sand. And then like at the front of the tank, we'll put the heat source, so you can actually see them come out more. Because if you put it at the back, they just hide at the back around the heat source.
And then we've got a UV light over the top.
Yeah, UV light.
The tank is probably only
they don't climb.
Probably only 12 inches deep. So the UV light is fairly low down, and also the ceramic, because it's obviously coming down, it's probably only sort of 10 inches to the sand. So it does get really hot where that ceramic heater is.
What kind of UV are you using for it?
10%.
14, isn't it?
Was it 14?
14. We use all our UV. We use the highest strength UV you can.
Okay. Are you using like Arcadia?
Yeah, we always use Arcadia as well.
Okay.
But obviously you got a mesh above that, so that filters out some of the UV. So although it's 14%, when it probably gets to the ground, and that falls off extremely quickly from a new UV tube, as well. So, yeah.
And then we use like big bits of bark for them to go on. But we found for the females, if you use like a pot plant cut in half, if you put that right at the back and you angle it slightly so you can't see in it, it just gives them a bit of privacy. And for the shyer females, they kind of need that area where you physically cannot see them, or they can't see the edge of the tank. So they seem to do it like that. Or the other way we keep them is we keep them in just like plastic tubs with a mesh lid. The similar kind of setup.
Big, large, flat Exoteria tank.
Yeah.
I don't know if you get them. They've got a black mesh top. They're clear tub. We use them quite successfully. We give, obviously it's sand, but we give them quite a lot of sand, and they move that around a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the telltale signs of when they lay eggs is you come down in the morning and it's completely excavated the sand all around, so you can see where the eggs are, but they're extremely fragile as well, unfortunately, aren't they?
Yeah.
Bird friends have put their fingers through them and done them. So. Sorry?
I said, are they really calcified eggs?
Yeah, there's hard shelled.
Hard shell, and they're quite big.
A big egg, you know.
20 millimeters.
Yeah, they're probably like
no, not that much. Sort of 16 mil.
Yeah, probably like that big, you know.
Like almost dime size, maybe nickel.
Yeah, that kind of size. They're quite a big egg. So for the female, it's quite a lot, you know, for them to kind of lay. But we found, to be honest, that putting them in a glass tank's better because the eggs don't stick. Where you put them in like your plastic like tubs, the eggs. I don't know if it's the difference between like the plastic, the glass, or what, but they seem to stick on the bottom of the plastic more. So you kind of sit in there and you put a tub over the top of it and you're waiting for it to loosen up, or you know. I think there was 3 eggs this season where I thought, oh, I've just got it, and then I heard the crack and I was like, oh no.
Oh man.
Damn. But that's just, you know. So I think we're going to do everything in glass tanks. I think that's the way to, what we feel is the way to do it. So,
Are they laying every month?
I mean, you get females that lay. So our oldest female, I think she laid like 6 or 8 clutches this year.
We're not very good at this. This is a question that we struggle to answer because we haven't been very good with it. But they seem to lay. Like I read a book, and it's the only book that I've got that's got any information on them, and it says they can lay eggs every 10 to 11 days. It's definitely not that, but they seem to lay eggs in quite closely together.
I think it's
every month. They stop. It's probably monthly for about 3 or 4 months, and that's it.
Yeah. And
that is an age thing as well. So obviously a younger one might lay 4 eggs, and I think as they get older, they lay more. Not quite sure how many they would lay, but I think we had 8 clutches.
I think our oldest female's done about 8 this year. What's the most you've ever had out of her?
And we started breeding these in 2020. So yeah.
I wonder if 2018. You know, the seasons in Africa, some being so much harsher that they get all of their year's eggs out in a smaller window, knowing there'd be famine for the rest of the year. Like, it's super interesting, you know, super, super cool.
Yeah. So Wally, what does your setup look like?
Let me explain in just a second. And I was trying to think, okay, what's common, what's different? And there's so many differences because I'm just starting this journey myself. So I'll talk about that in just a second, but I wanted to share a tip. So Jeff and Jake, I have a terrible memory. Hold on, what was I talking about? I have a terrible memory, and what I'll do, and I'm a huge Excel, Google Sheets person. I use Excel all the time, but I don't like to run upstairs and then record everything. So what I do is I'll take painter's tape, and every year is a different color. You know, I think this year we're on pink. So I'll take painter's tape, and on their enclosure, I'll put a strip of painter's tape. And then when they lay, I'll mark the date and how many eggs, and I'll keep going like that. And with some of my geckos, I'm on like the 3rd, 4th, 5th year, and I just overlay the tape. So if I ever want to go back, and this sounds kind of dumb, but if I want to, I'll put it into my Excel spreadsheet, the nerd that I am. But if I just want to go back and I want to review the history, oh my gosh, we're not getting as many eggs, I think, this year. What was last year? I'll just peel off this year's new tape, and I'll see what last year's lays were like. So that helps me because it gives me a real visual of what's going on that I can see like right now without running upstairs and getting my Excel spreadsheet out.
Awesome.
That's a good tip.
Yeah, it's so important for us, and I do that for crested geckos. So you know, when we have something hatch, I'll do the little paint tape on their hatch enclosures. Works out really well. My enclosure, PVC, how big is it? I think it's a 30-gallon. I should have the numbers, but I'd have to get to my Excel spreadsheet to find out for sure. It's a lower, more terrestrial enclosure, 30 gallons. So it's a pretty big enclosure for them. And again, I keep males and females separate other than breeding. sand throughout. And what I'll do is I'll try to load it up a little bit more in the back. And like you said, when they do lay eggs, when they're ready, they'll start digging around and moving that sand. And usually I'll have a hide with the whole entrance jammed up with sand when they're ready to lay or have laid. I have 2 hides, and they're very, very simple, like Chinese food black containers. Probably, I don't even know, half a gallon size maybe. And I have a notch in there so they can get in. And I have just the 2 hides, a food dish and a water dish. And that's all that I have. I have a hide on the warm side and a hide on the cool side. The sand is about maybe an inch deep throughout the enclosure, except in the back where it's maybe 1.5 to 2 inches for about 4, 5, 6 inches. Regular lighting, LED lighting, it is a high intensity, so I don't have UV lighting on there, and maybe that's something that I'll need to look into. You talked about glass enclosures. I'd rather keep some animals in glass enclosures, especially arid animals. This just worked out for me, because of where I had other animals. But I'm going to go back to this recording and listen to the whole setup that you just described and see if I can make some changes to mine.
I think what's important is UV light for the females. We do keep the males sometimes in tanks without any UV, but we just feel that UV's, because of where they come from, the intensity of light and the size of the eggs, that the females need that little bit extra. Oh, we have a calcium pot of calcium in there that they usually fill up with sand within 30 seconds of putting that in, but
Right.
They do lick from it occasionally.
Yeah, we have seen them lick from the calcium dish, so
okay,
they do use that.
All right.
Yeah.
So this will be kind of like a question for all 3 of you, for Peridor and for the Contradactylus, right? So pretty much how you guys setting up your eggs for the incubator. And while you say that, I'm gonna use the restroom. Be right back.
Go ahead, Jeff and Jake.
I think with the Pictus gecko eggs, there's lots of different ways, because I think they're quite adaptable eggs. It's not like if you don't follow this precise way of doing them, you're going to lose them all. So people will say different things, I guess, how they do it. But we usually use milk bottle lids, little plastic cups like about that size, fill them in with dry sand, and then put them on damp perlite. And I don't think it matters too much the humidity, or the temperature. They just seem to kind of hatch out.
So we probably incubate at what? Some we might incubate, if it gets hot, it might be like 30 something, and then I think the lowest it got was when one of our incubators turned off, and I think it was like
45.
Yeah, 45.
Cooked them a little bit, but they seem to be okay because it only for a while.
Wow.
Yeah. We got various. We got incubators at 26 that we keep the eggs out. We got incubators at 27 and at 29. So we tried to spread the eggs in there. I don't know if that is their temperature sex determined or not, but we seem to get a good mix.
We're doing about the same, and I'm going to interrupt and not get into chondros because I'm going to listen to you talk about how to incubate chondro eggs. For me, for us, for Periodora pica, we do exactly the same thing. A little hatch box, fill it up halfway with, we've got a clay fired material we sell on our store, but that clay fired material about halfway up, bottle cap on top of that. But then we use also, the one difference that we use is we use that dry clay high fired material in the bottle cap as well, so the eggs don't roll around a lot. But we don't use sand because I've had instances where if my humidity gets a little bit high, that sand will get a little bit moist, a little bit damp, and it will actually cause problems with the bottom of the eggs occasionally. So I've veered away from the sand, and I'll use a different material that doesn't retain that dampness. but that's about it. We incubate anywhere from 70, 78 degrees. What is that? About 25, 26 Celsius to about 82, 28, if I remember. So we're anywhere around that range. So if I get eggs from other geckos, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this and this and this, and run over to the incubator, put them in the incubator, set temperatures. For Periodor picta, we throw them in a box and let them sit on a shelf somewhere in our leopard room, which is around 80 and varies occasionally. So,
yeah.
Have you noticed anything, Wally, with the sex determination on heat? Or
I've been asked and asked and asked and asked about the sex determination of Periodor picta. I've not found any differences. We're right around 50%, but it just might be the way that we're doing things. Not that it's right or wrong. It just might be our situation gives us 50%. Now, I just downloaded within a week. I just haven't had time to go back to it. I've looked and looked and looked because I knew I saw it about 10, 15 years ago, a paper on sex determination in Periodora. And I think it was Picta specifically and a couple of other. And I just found that paper based on Jason talking about academic.edu. And I went back and I found the paper on Periodora Picta. I just haven't read it yet. I thought that the paper said that it was sex determination dependent on the temperatures.
really?
So I haven't done my homework today, so I don't know for sure.
I'm curious when you read it and find out. I'd like to know, because I was thinking in my head, like, they breed so much, like you guys are saying, and so young, they would almost make sense it would almost make sense for them to be 50-50 regardless. One male, one female egg every time, and you'd have a very successful population of Pictus geckos in the wild. But I'm curious to see what you find. Keep me posted on that one.
Yep.
All right, Jeff and Jake, you want to talk about the Conjudaculus, how you guys do your incubation, so me, Wally, and Jake can learn?
You talk.
Yeah, so I think in the past we used to keep them in a similar way of the Pictus. You put your perlite in your tub with your milk bottle lid with your egg in it and like that. But we found that if you kept them all the eggs together, one would hatch out.
They're extremely sensitive to vibration, isn't it?
Yeah, and they would like trample over the other eggs. And then like within a couple of days, some of the other eggs that
are literally there and then.
There or then, or they all seem to hatch out all at once. But the one that comes out first does well, but the ones that get disturbed kind of don't make it. So we've now, like this year, we've tried a season. We use like like you get your tool bits for your like different screws and all of that.
Yeah.
So we fill, like a little organizer. So we use that. In the middle, we fill like some of the section with like damp-ish perlite. Put like air holes from each section.
So we get a
soldering iron.
Put a hole in them so there's all ventilation in all the sections.
Yeah, all the way around. And then we tried filling it with perlite and putting the gecko. Putting each section, filling it with perlite, and then putting the milk bottle lids with the sand in. But we found there was too much in there, and the gecko kind of got a bit stressed. So now we just fill that section up with sand. So it's probably like this thick. And then you just chuck the egg straight in. And then, I mean, that seems to be better because
you have got to watch that you don't, if the sand starts getting humid, you've got to take the sand out and start, because the humidity on the eggs will kill the eggs.
Yeah.
So, but they do need a kind of humidity. And that's why that little perlite it is perlite, damp perlite section you've got to watch.
Doesn't leak out
too much.
Yeah.
They do need some humidity.
But we find as well with the babies, like after their first
temperature first.
Oh sorry. Temperatures. So how we temperature wise, I would say they are temperature sex determined. I've heard people say that they would get like a clutch. One would be male, one would be female. But if you incubate at a high temperature, so like 30-ish,
29 plus,
you'll kind of end up mostly male. where
Yeah.
if you incubate, we separate. So we do like in a clutch, we put one in the hot incubator, one in the cold incubator, and that's like 20. I mean, it's like 24-ish, but I think we've just trialled it this year and we've seemed to get a lot more females. But I've had a few that have.
It's not 100%. We don't know.
Yeah.
So is this? Are we right here? Are they? We're not sure.
Not sure. We're trialing it.
We're trialing it, but we are finding that the cooler one does seem to produce more females.
Or like if they laid an eggs in the tank, you know, because normally any Chronodactylus species, they lay their eggs right next to the hot heat source, wouldn't they, or the hottest part of the tank. So I think that if you got them out early enough and you put them in the incubator, you might get the right temperature kind of thing. So we found a couple of years ago, if you got the eggs straight away as soon as they were laid, you might end up with one male, one female. That was quite common. But if you left it a couple of days, then right underneath the hot heat spot at 45 or 40 degrees, they both end up male. So
what was we spoken about with Chronodactylus? About the eggs? If you don't hook them out within the first
couple of days, yeah.
3 weeks, is it? Or week? Or I can't remember what it was now.
Yeah, we had a friend and he was saying that
with all Chronodactylus,
if you took the eggs out within the first couple of weeks, they are when their temperature set's determined, that's normally like 2 or 3 weeks. That happens within the egg. So what will happen is the egg will get laid, and then like a week later you find the egg, but it's been at a really hot temperature. Or, you know, you might get lucky where if you've left it in there for like 3 months, or sorry, not 3 months, 3-4 weeks, and then you hook the egg out, it's probably more likely male. So yeah, we're just trying.
So it's important to hook the eggs out as soon as you can.
As soon as you can. So.
Yeah.
And that's true with leopard geckos too. I mean, you know, temperature sex determined leopard geckos, you can incubate them at a lower temperature for females for, 77, 78, 79 for, 2 or 3 weeks. And then after that, you can move them to a warmer incubator and the colors will come out, but they'll stay female, So that's really interesting stuff, guys. And I wish you the best of luck kind of proving this out over the next 2 years. Those are the things that people, the hobby, keepers don't do as much. So good luck with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you guys noticed anything with these guys in the colors and temperatures or no? Like Wally was just mentioning with the leopard geckos, do you feel that temperatures at all play any factor in the Chronodactylus' color?
No, I don't think we've not had enough. I think if you ask me that question like in 3 years' time, I might have a bit more evidence to prove. But at the moment, it's not.
We're producing quite a lot of them, but it's still not, early days.
Yeah.
I think you should talk about the females when they're hatched, when they first hatch out.
I can't remember
the colours.
What do you mean? Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. When they hatch out, your males will have the white spots on, obviously. Where like the Benibian form, the southern Benibian form, their spots take 6 months to develop. But the females, their tails seem to be more whiter than a male. So on their like tail, obviously it'll be.
Again, this is a bit of a theory at the moment.
A theory, but we're kind of about 80% sure on this, if I'm being honest.
It's the 2 bands of white.
Yeah, so on their tail, the males will their tip of their tail will just be white, but where the female will have like the 2 or 3 bands will be white, and then
and the feeding.
Oh, and feeding response as well. So males have always good feeding response. You might get a shy male, but he's normally bang on straight away with the crickets. But females always seem, ever since as a bait, like when they're straight out the egg, always scared of food. You've got to they might get like a semi-aggressive
play with them a little bit, poke the cricket a bit,
and yeah. So you can
for the babies, are you keeping the from this male female feeding response? Are you keeping the babies together? Could the females have more of a subdominant kind of, reaction to the feeder foods. I don't know.
We keep all ours separate because I think that they would.
But we haven't tried keeping them together, have we?
We haven't, but we haven't tried it, so maybe.
But we feel that because they're quite solitary as adults, would they be together as babies? So, I don't know. It'd be interesting to actually try.
Yeah.
But you run a risk, don't you, then?
I definitely love that attention to detail. Just
lose
talking about
toes by accident.
Right. Yeah. Talking about the stripes. That's crazy attention to detail. Like most people probably wouldn't even look at that and even think about it. You guys are actually, taking notes on this stuff. That's amazing.
Super,
to say the least. Yeah.
Well, we have really struggled trying to sex them sometimes because these spots come out sometimes really, really late on some and some really early. So, I guess this comes back to really trying to nail down the sexes because we had people where we sold pairs and they're not pairs. We've kind of done our best and we obviously changed, swapped over the female. So we're quite hypersensitive for trying to get this right.
Yeah.
Some geckos are notorious, like Orientis, they're very hard to actually sex until they get to, over a year old. So our answer to that is we don't sell them until they're a year old. So, yeah, we're quite sensitive for trying to work out what the sexes are, even from an early age, and trying to work out a theory of how to sex these better. Yeah.
I think the thing is because they're getting more common now, more so than ever. But I think we want people to succeed with what we sell them. So we don't want really to sell someone 2 males. We want to be 100% sure that that's definitely a pair that they're getting because we just want people to breed them really.
Yeah, so, it doesn't help us if we have to swap out, a male to a female. So that's why we're probably selling them at a later age than we maybe some people would. So we know definitely what people are getting.
Yeah. So are the because I know like with Chihuahuas, they're really aggressive when it comes to their eggs, trying to get their eggs out. How are the contradactylists? Are they aggressive when you're trying to get the eggs from the tank?
I think it's just because you got your hands in there, they think you're food.
You're fair game.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what, the most annoying thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say the most annoying thing is when you got an egg in your hand and this gecko is like just about to chew your finger, and you're thinking, if it bites me, I'm squishing this egg, and you're like, no.
Right.
So why do you think you do
paper
it?
Towel roll. Yeah, I have to get a paper towel roll anytime I go on like my Chihuahuas just to get eggs. Yeah, I got a big old paper towel roll, block her vision from me, and she's just tearing up the paper towel like just. I got bits and pieces everywhere. I'm like, God, seriously. And yeah, just so I don't get my fingers bit. I was wondering the same thing with them. I mean, like I said, they got those contradactyls and Gulliver got bulldog heads, so I think they could probably do some damage. So
and I'm guessing once they bite on, they're going to shake their head. I think what you need to do is kind of the Cobra idea, where you kind of give them a target, and then behind the scenes you kind of reach around. I don't know, but I don't want to be bit by one either.
No, they don't look nice to be bit.
No.
You'd be amazed how small geckos have still got really sharp teeth and can draw blood. Small things, So yeah, I wouldn't want to get bit by them. But that's why Jake gets the eggs out of the container. You see, that is 100% certain way for me not to get bitten. You see,
smart.
Guys, I don't think I asked, or any of them for us out here that don't know, how heavy and how long do the chondros get?
That's a good question.
Because it varies by locale, I guess, right? You find some locales are bigger than others.
Not really. I would say that the South Africa ones are chunkier, actually, in the sense of their like body mass seems to be a lot chunkier. But I don't know if that could just be the couple that we've got,
all the bloodlines.
or the bloodlines. So
They're fairly the same size, really.
they're all fairly the same size.
Yeah.
But like you say, you'll get like a male that seems to be like super duper aggressive, and you see these strong neck muscles on them.
I think that's the thing that can vary on them is the chunking out of the head at the back here. Some of the aggressive males will really chunk out there. To the slightly less aggressive males. They'll all take your fingers off, but yeah. Yeah, I think they're fairly same sort of size, to be honest with you, the adults.
Yeah, so probably like bodies.
No, shall we?
Oh yeah,
Best thing to do is
we'll show you one.
we'll show you one. No, that's the females are slightly smaller, aren't they?
Yeah, the first one you showed us looked pretty big, man. That's how I'm like, how big are those things? Look big.
Yeah, this one's probably the biggest.
Yeah, so this is the oldest one we've got.
Let me do that.
So this is the oldest one we've got. He's probably from like 2016, I think.
I think you should put your finger in it so we can see the size.
Put my finger in
Agreed. Agreed.
Nine. Get a pen.
Well, look, there's a pen.
That's
That's a standard felt
All right.
pen, isn't it?
All right.
So
No, about
They're definitely not a micro.
almost same size as a leopard gecko, probably.
Leopard gecko.
Yeah.
yeah,
But their teeth are like 4 times bigger. Their teeth are 4 times bigger than the leopard geckos.
Jaws too.
yeah.
So for all three of you guys right here for Periodora and Chondros, how are you guys setting up your babies? So Jeff, go ahead, go with the your way.
are we talking? So with the pictures, we try to do them in groups with the sizes, and as we say, we obviously separate the sexes. So that's a very simple tub. We'll water dish. We'll put a calcium dish in right from the start with them, and as I say, we'll sprinkle calcium like snow in the tank, and we use I think they're spray can lids, to be honest with you, with a hole cut in the side.
I remember you telling me that last time, Jake.
And because they're dark, they seem to love that because it's dark inside. And we'll have a slightly humid side to them, sort of sand and peat, and then the dry side. But we'll put lots and lots of visual barriers in. We'll put lots of these pots in. So if we've got 10 geckos, we'll have probably 10 pots in there. And we find that's key because then they can get away from other geckos with the visual barriers, what we find important. And also, I think it probably enhances hunting food because they've got to actually look for it, you know.
Oh yeah, it's competition.
Mm.
Mm.
What about
And
you?
then just put it on a heat pad, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the room, it's very simple.
You feed them crickets right off the jump, right from when they're born, and you start feeding them. You go right to the crickets.
We try to feed them a variety of things, really. So we'd feed them the buffalo worms sometimes, or small mealworms if we can, as soon as they get. Then we'll feed them five rats. They love them. And we'll feed them small crickets, and we feed them small cockroaches as well.
And woodlice as well.
And woodlice. We try to feed them woodlice as well. So we try to feed them a bit of everything right from the start so that they don't get maybe fussy on one food source.
What about you, Jake?
Wow, you want
Jake?
how you keep the pictus first, and then both you guys can tell us how you set up your conjure babies?
Sure.
Yeah.
For Picta, I think we do it completely different. So on hatch, I put them in a 6-quart tub. So it's a very, very small container. It's basically a paper towel on the bottom, a food dish, bottle cap food dish, bottle cap water dish. And I take an egg carton and I split the egg carton in half and then half again. So 4 pieces. And I put that in the 6-quart. So there's plenty of hiding spaces with this egg carton. I can mist it if I need to. I usually don't mist these containers, though. The water just seems to be adequate enough. Occasionally I'll see one that has a little shed on the tail, or I can see some shed somewhere, so I'll miss the egg cartons, and that within the next day it's gone. So I'll start loading up an egg carton. I try to keep it by pair so that I can, do the whole genetics thing and all. But by pair, I'll have all of these 6 quarts going at one time, and I'll keep them in there for about 2 months. Or again, as I'm watching for males, that 6 quart starts getting divided out pretty quickly. I'll keep, by 2 months, I might have maybe 10 babies in there, 10, 12 babies. I'm not too worried about that because we are feeding a load of mealworms, micro mealworms. So micro mealworms account for probably 90% of their food. And again, calcium and multivitamin in that little cup for the micro mealworms. And we're feeding every other day, and we're just loading them up with mealworms. I've not found them to be fussy whatsoever. And they're just chowing down. They're always, healthy looking in there. And then again, once they reach about either male or about 4 months or so for females, we'll then move them out to, or if the tub gets a little crowded with more than 2 or 3 females, and we'll start moving them out to the 15 quarts. Males go to the 15 quart, and I'll load that tub up with 6, 7, 8 males. Same setup, but here instead of substrate of paper towel, I'll add sand. Just maybe a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch with sand, and a bigger food dish and a bigger water dish. That's about it. Temperatures 85, 88 hot spot, and ambient temperatures for the rest.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Jake, what about you for the Ungullifer?
We just keep them all separate, just stand, and then we put like terracotta pots, like broken ones. Just kind of keep it simple. Like I just put 2 hides of these terracotta pots.
We use terracotta pots.
Yeah, so just them broken up, and they're probably only in like little tanks as babies like that. And then as they get bigger, you put them in the slightly bigger ones.
Are we giving UV light as well over
UV.
the top?
And then mist them 2-3 times a week.
And we give them clay pots because they can then rub their skin to start, it goes off on the nose first. So if you've got a terracotta pot, we actually put this in with the picture sometimes as well. It's a sharp edge, so they can start to get that shed off.
Yeah.
But they don't seem to have much problem with sheds, do
No,
they?
not really. They seem to be quite fine.
And then you water them, 3 times a week?
Yeah, water them 3 times a week. I mean, like you can
and heavily water them.
Heavily water them. So like you spray them, or like when we feed them, like once a week, I'll probably just get like a water bottle, put my finger in the end, so it like drips. And you're not flooding the tank, but it's like bigger water droplets than like a spraying mister would.
So when we feed the chronos, we water them first, and then we feed them. So they sometimes get the sand; it's damp, so they're getting moisture that way as well.
Yeah,
and that's when we had Pachydaxus Ranger. We used to do that because they will lick sand and they will eat sand for him to get the moisture out, and they're obviously from the same region, so. That is a strategy that they would use. Is they would actually hunt when the soil is damp, so they can attain moisture that way as well. So yeah,
interesting. Interesting. Have you guys any experience? I know it's a little off topic. Experience any impaction issues with them eating sand or anything?
Not really, because they seem to like the Ranger are the same. Like when they would eat. Like with Chronodactylus, when they eat, if they've missed, they can like flick their tongue and like push the sand out their mouth. So they're quite aggressive, you see. So they're quite like.
I think the sand type is really important. We did a lot of work with the Ranger and really tried to work out the sand types. We asked someone that went to Libya to bring some sand back for us, but I think he thought we were putting his leg, but we weren't. We wanted the sand so we could find out. But obviously, if you use play sand, it is a rounded sand. It's not got sharp sand. It's obviously man-made, so it's got sharp, pointy edges. So obviously, if you use a smoother sand, it's going to go through their intestinal tract easier and come out the other end good.
But we change the sand every year in them because we found that after, like, if you leave it a year and you've kind of left the same, you just like sieve the sand in the tank.
It's sort of gungy.
It goes a bit like it clumps up, and we don't think it's good for them.
So yeah.
And
we changed the sand with the gecko in there because again it's a stressy thing.
Yeah.
So I'll either get Jake to do it, or I put a cricket tub over it, and then take all the sand and clean the tank, and then do the other half almost literally.
Yeah.
So we keep the gecko out to try and reduce the stress on the females. That is a real
key thing.
Yeah, they're not something you're going to handle. They're not something that you need to poke and prod all the time. You need to avoid stressing the geckos.
I love how you put that emphasis on the animals, man. You're always, with everything you guys described, man, it's always about the gecko's well-being, never your convenience. I admire that, man. You guys are you really do a great job, man.
Thank you.
All right, so coming close to the end, so I do have like a couple more questions for all three of you, right? Tips and tricks on successfully keeping these geckos. Do you have any that you guys normally use for them?
I'm going to jump in because I'm going to steal your thought, Jeff, as far as the Periodora picta. And that, I can't emphasize more. Get the males out as soon as you possibly can. If you keep your Periodora picta together as male and female as adult, and this is a kind of controversial, I do for most of mine. Some of them I keep male and female separate, but I keep them together. But I'm watching them every other day. I am like an eagle eye watching the females every other day. And if I see anything different with them hanging out in the back where they should be in the front or not under this hide and they're sitting in the open, that male comes right out. The males are very, very physical and aggressive to the females. But if you provide, your enclosure the right way, you'll be fine. But again, get that male out as the first sign of any aggression whatsoever. Get them out right away, and always have for the Periodora picta. One more real quick for the Periodora picta. Always have a humid space somewhere, whether that's under a hide or if you have a hide box, just like you'd provide for a crested gecko. Have a humid place somewhere because adults sometimes will go through a little bit of a shed issue.
Yeah, we kind of do the same with the pictures. We got hide boxes, damp peat hide boxes. We usually try to provide 2, and we keep them in quite a large tank actually. So it's probably 2 foot deep and sort of 18 inches wide. So it's a big tank for 3, and we put loads of visual barriers, bits of bark, bits of broken clay pots. These two hide pots have got, because we try to keep them together in a smaller space, and that female just gets bashed too much by the male. So we found that if you're going to keep them in a tank where they can't obviously run off, you need those visual barriers. It's important. But I think we do that with all geckos. I think it's really important. If you keep together, they need to be able to not see each other, and if they want a bit of quiet time, do some knitting or something, they can do that, the females. Maybe not the knitting, but
yeah.
What about you, Jake? What do you got? Any
tips and tricks? I think like with the Chronodactylus, just you got to really if you're looking to breed, you just got to understand what your males are like, what your females are like, and just really character and just pair up towards that. Say if you've only got 2 geckos, but you've got like a really dominant male and like not a dominant female, and they're the only 2 you've got, you can't get any more. I would say just put them out in for a day and then get them out, and that kind of thing. And it's and
watch
them, see how they get on, and I would say as well, like just the biggest tip for the chrondos is do not disturb the females. Just leave them be. Don't play with them. I mean, it's so tempting.
Reduce that stress level, isn't it?
Yeah. It's so tempting to get them out and want to show them off to people and be like, oh, I mean, not that you'd pick it up, but you get out of the tub and be like, oh, look at this, So quite often we show the males off to people, but we rarely, unless the females aren't in breeding, they're not being bred, I won't show people females.
And even looking at them, we restrict it to sort of on feeding days, which is probably feed the adults twice a week or once a week. And that's something that we found is because they're so aggressive in their eating that they'll eat every day. You give them steak every day, they're going to eat it. And actually we found that if you feed once or twice a week,
it's better.
It's better. And even the babies, because they've got such a good feeding response on it, the temptation is to feed them every day or something. And they're just going to grow up too fast. And their skeleton's not going to be vigorous. And so when they come to laying eggs, they're going to have real problems. So we would even not restrict their food, but we would definitely only feed them 2 or 3 times a week, probably twice a week.
And not fatty food as well. So like
waxworms are a bit of a no-no.
Yeah, like we do it if we're doing like a video for something. A waxworm's quite easy to film rather than a cricket. Do you know what I mean?
If something's getting stressed out with something, waxworms are good because they they taste nice and smell nice. Not that I eat them, but
But they're quite fatty. So for all the geckos, for that, like especially young ones, it's not really good for them.
19% fat.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah. So. Yeah.
All right. So I got my one last question. I've asked this to Jake already. I've asked this to Wally. So being in this hobby, right? What has been your biggest failures, and what have you learned from that?
I suppose it's like a lot of things is with keeping stuff. You want to keep everything now. You don't want to wait till next year. You want it now. And I suppose probably we went to Ham, I think it was 2015, and Jake was obviously, he was 15 or 16, and he wanted to breed Nephoralis, and we bought all the different species, and we bought them from the tables. We come home, and we had a limited amount of success. But I guess what we learned from that is you need to start with something that something simple and build up. And actually buying loads of different types of species of geckos isn't great. Like, I said about Jake, and I joked about him with Pictus eggs. But I'm fully confident now with Crondo eggs, where they're trying to bite him, and that he's not going to crack the egg. But he's learned that from a Pictus egg. So that's great. But that's, so start with the simple geckos. Don't try too much. And I guess the other thing I've learned over the years is you got to, as I say, you got to buy into it. You start buying stuff off breeders, and then you start getting the better stuff. Often we get offered geckos from people that we know because they think, oh, they're not going to kill them. They're going to look after them, keep them well, and succeed with them. So that's nice when that happens. But as I say, you probably got to be in the hobby for a while for that to happen. And sometimes it's a case of just keep trying. We as I say, with your Gonosaurus orientis, we had them for 5 years and failed at breeding them. And then we just started asking questions to people, and we started to work out what we was doing wrong. We're successful with them now. Sometimes you just got to keep trying. And I suppose the other thing that we've learned is that sometimes you keep geckos and they're not for you. You're doing something slightly wrong, and that's going to cause failure. And every time you get something, it dies, and you get another one, it dies. And in the end, you think, right, we can't keep them because we're obviously doing something wrong, and then move on to another gecko. So we probably don't keep geckos for long before we move on to other geckos, because we like the challenge of new stuff, and we can't keep everything, Anything else you want to say?
I think what's really funny is the gecko that you really struggle breeding, you sell it to someone, then within like 3 weeks they've messaged you.
We bred them. They're really good. Thanks, I got eggs off them already. And you're going, what?
And you think, I've tried for like 3 years with these. And you're
what
like,
do you do?
But it's just
Oh,
how
yeah.
people do things differently, you know.
Oh yeah, definitely. Nice. Well, definitely, it was definitely a pleasure to have you guys here. Wally, same thing. Thank you for
I
being a
have my
special
last.
guest host. Go ahead, Ant.
I ask all the guests if you could give a child that aspire to do what you're doing with what you guys are doing one day in the future. If a kid came to you and said, "I want to do what you're doing someday," what would you tell that child? What would you tell that kid that wanted to grow up and breed geckos?
Come on, you're the youngest one here, Joe.
I mean, you raised them, but
I think you kind of. I'm going to let Jake think about that for just a second, and I'll say, find a mentor. Find a mentor. Find three
awesome.
mentors. Find a mentor and watch what they do. Watch what they do. Watch what they do, and ask questions. Ask questions. Ask. Go to reptile shows. So if you know that person, oh, I really want to breed, Chondrodactylus, go to the reptile shows that these two folks are at and watch what they're doing. Sit behind the scenes and don't ask questions. Jump in with specific questions and ask, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And just gather as much information as you possibly can before diving in, to the deep end and buying, like I've done, and it sounds like, you guys have all done too, buying, 14 different species of that, or different pairs of that gecko. Find mentors.
Awesome advice.
Oh yeah.
I think the internet is, good and bad. But I sometimes wonder, you get this. I've never kept these, but if I kept these, this is what I would do. And I sit and think, I don't want to know what you'd do because you don't keep them. I think exactly what Wally says. It's asking questions, and it's just learning people. Like we all have little things how we feed geckos. And little tips where we do that. I don't know if other people do that like we do. I don't know, but yeah. And we've found it sometimes hard because we've kept stuff that is very rare, and therefore people sometimes are reluctant to give you that. So start with the simple stuff. That's really important. Start with pictures.
Yeah, that makes Wally happy right there.
Yeah.
Jake?
I mean, I would say the same. Start off with the simple species. If you want to do like work Goniosaurus, work with the Henesis first, work your way up. Don't jump, because that's when it gets, I think like I found it when I was younger, like when we kept like the Nephralis and the Shrops or whatever. It's really disheartening when you spent loads of money on a gecko and then you kill it through not having the experience. And I remember like I was probably like only like 16. I remember like when we lost quite a few of like the Nephralis, being really discouraged. And I kind of come, I didn't come away from that. I always helped Jeff feed the geckos, but I'm
not sure about that actually.
No, but I wasn't as keen into it as I am now, because I felt really discouraged. And I think the important thing as well is if you look at having a collection of geckos, you need easy geckos and you need hard geckos. If all your collection is just hard geckos and you just do silly things and you kind of do things wrong, it's really easy to get disheartened very quickly. Where if you have like a couple easy geckos and the other half quite rare geckos, hard geckos, it balances it out. Because if one species of gecko isn't breeding, you think, well, on the upside, we've got the Pictus, we've got the Viper geckos, so it kind of levels it out. But if all you've got is the really hard species, and you have a bad year with half your species,
very discouraging.
Yeah. And I think that's where you see people pull out the hobby altogether. What's a shame.
And incubators, I think, as well. That's another point. I would say have several incubators and consider renewing them every 5 years, because the amount of people that we talk to that say, oh, the incubator jammed on and it cooked all the eggs and we've got nothing this year to show for it. And as the old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's kind of the same.
That's a good one for this one. Yeah.
Awesome advice, man. Awesome advice.
Definitely. Like I said, appreciate all you guys being here. It was a hell of a conversation.
Yeah.
I said, thank you again, Wally, for joining us as a special host.
Thank you.
Jeff and Jake, appreciate this. Definitely love having you guys on. I said, I'm gonna look through your page again because I'm probably gonna ask you to come on again about another whatever species, you know. I said, coming at the end. I said, you guys have a great night. I know it's probably like almost 9 o'clock at your over there. I said, I'm about to go pick up a gecko, so I gotta go do that.
Nice.
All right.
It was a pleasure meeting you. Jake has said nothing but great things about you. Honor meeting you and finally getting to talk to you. Wally, you know how I feel about you, buddy.
As always, thank you very much. I'm
All three guys
privileged.
so much. I would love to see you guys maybe keep in touch and figure these chondrodactyls out a little bit more, man. It's a beautiful thing what you guys are doing with your observations, and I admire all of you. Just know that if anything, that someone's out here admiring what you're doing, and your work is not going unnoticed.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, really enjoyed just talking.
Enjoyed talking. Great to meet you, Wally, as well. I've watched some of your YouTube videos for years now.
Sorry about that.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, have a great night. Have a great afternoon.
Have a great night, guys.
All right.
Take care.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.